again, thank you for having taken the time to watch the movie in a theater. That means a lot to me.
Well, it's just the beginning, right? Thank you for being here and bringing your exquisite film for us to see in the theater. I wanted to ask you, where did this fall, this book, in terms of your life and importance, and when did you first interact with it?
It's a book that I discovered by myself in a bookstore in a small town where I was studying at high school, so I was 13 or 14 years old, and I was into sci-fi at the time. It's a long story. Let's say that was very bad hockey player, which is an understatement. And I was really in love with science fiction at the time, and I discovered this book by myself, read it, and was totally mesmerized. I read all the series, and then I became a Frank Herbert. I read all his novels. There's so many things that deeply touched me when I read the book 40 years ago, and it's a book that stayed with me through the years. Every time I opened it, I read it a few times, and it's a kind of book that, according to where you are in life, you discover new things about it, and so it's like the love of the book the flame was there, the desire was there, and I remember seeing the David Lynch movie and made in the 80s. I was very excited to see it, but when I saw the movie, which had very strong qualities, there's a lot of things that I loved about it, but things that I felt I connected less with it when it deviated from the book. And David Lynch is a master, is one of my favorite filmmakers, but I went out of the theater saying to myself, it's not what I had in mind, it's not what the book was about, it was not, and I kept waiting for someone to do a new adaptation. I thought that it would come out one day. I was sure that at one point Ridley Scott would do it. I was sure somebody would do it. I was like, somebody will do it, you know? And I got tired.
So I'm curious, when did your love of film and your decision to become a filmmaker intersect with this particular love for this film, for this book, Dune?
In my quite young, at the same years, I was like starting to be interested by what was happening behind the camera. I was like raised in a small town, and in that particular area, it was more about American movies, a lot of and one of the director. That's where I discovered the notion of the director. What does the director do? What is the job of the director? What is an author? What is a filmmaker? And it came through Steven Spielberg, because he was I love Spielberg. And the thing is you know, it's very interesting when you're young, and there's something about the way some movies are different, and why they are because there's a name attached to it, and then I discovered, and through Spielberg I discovered a new wave, because I saw Close Encounter of the Third Kind, and there was this weird French scientist that was François Truffaut, and then I he's a filmmaker too, and then I discovered Godard, and it was like it was really my door, and I was. At the time, my best friend and I, who was as good hockey player as I was, instead of we were doing storyboards and writing screenplay. It was fantasy, because of course it was out of reach for us, but still we were dreaming big at the time, and we dreamt at one point, what would a Dune movie look like? So it's funny when you think about it, but at the time it was just like fantasy dream.
Well, I'm glad, in a sense, that nobody else came along to make this after the other mixed receptions to the last films. But I guess you particularly directing this was not like a real kind of, I spent years trying to reach the owner of the rights. It happened in a very quick fashion, wasn't it?
The thing is, when when I started to make movies in Los Angeles and Hollywood, people were asking me, what would be your dream project? And I had the arrogance to always answer with Dune. I would love.
It pays to be honest.
Yeah, no, but I would love, so at one point, I remember at the time in the Blade Runner years, I was like, at the beginning, I was like trying to understand what the rights. I heard that the rights were soon to be available, and I was trying to get them, which I didn't. And I learned that someone that legendary named Mary Parent, a producer that is very, very respected and well known and full gut, and I made publicly a statement that it would be a dream of mine, and she called me because she got the right, looking for a director. I was looking for a way to, and it was the fastest meeting in my life. Technically, I walk into her office. We look at each other. Should we do this? Yes. Shake hands. That was done. And, the moment where people are asking me, "Were you afraid?" I got afraid at one moment when I called Tanya, my partner and wife and producer. She worked on the movie too. She's a producer on the movie. I remember getting out of Legendary and calling her from outside, saying, "I think I will do Dune." And then I felt the weight on my shoulder.
It's a big commitment. But what's amazing about this film and many of your films, really all of them, but certainly I'm speaking of the larger films and the bigger canvas is, and I think it's something we can talk about intermittently through this conversation, is the personal element that you bring to this, that you're working on this huge scope and you're dealing with very big ideas, but yet the nuances of a smaller film, an independent film, are always present. And I respect that so much, and it brings such life to this film when you're looking at any of the characters, which we can talk about. But I also want to talk a little bit about the screenplay. That must have been a really hard decision to decide what are you going to do? Are you going to squeeze this all into one film, or is it going to be a series? And the related complications that may or may not come with that.
Yeah, your comment touched me. I thank you very much about what I understand is the intimate part of the movie, the intimacy of the movie. But I would say that the idea of splitting it in two parts, I'm totally responsible. I'm the one who brought this idea. Why? Because right from the start, when I revisited the book at the time, reading it, and starting to think about how I will crack it, I said to the studio that it will be not a good idea. It will be the best way to do it would be in two parts, and they spontaneously agreed. It was not a discussion. It was a very fast decision. That the thing is, my first idea was to shoot both parts at the same time, so the audience would not have to wait years. Because I was saying we would shoot both parts. We'll show the first one, wait a year, a bit like the Lord of the Rings that did, that's what. But everybody thought it was too expensive, which I respected, and I kind of liked the idea that I thought there was something very honest about the idea of making the first part of a story and then see if it does interest people, if it creates enough enthusiasm, and then you do the second part. I thought it's a risky but honest, and I feel good about it. Yeah.
I think we're all looking forward to like 3 or 4. What are you doing for the next 30 years? Casting Timothy Chalamet, it seems, after I've seen the film, so perfect. I must admit, when I was thinking a little different. Well, yeah, he is young, but he's so skinny, you know. And he's a terrific actor, and been here before, and we're thrilled to have him. But right now, in retrospect, it just seems like just such a brilliant stroke of casting there. Was he always in your mind?
Yeah, he was like the only name on the page for Paul. Why? Because Timothy, first of all, when you know you're gonna put upon the shoulder of a young actor an old movie, I needed some. Timothy is a unique talent. It's like one of the best actors of the past decade. I mean, of his age, it's a very, he's very mature, has a beautiful culture, is brilliant, very intelligent. And at the same time, he looks so young on screen. Sometimes Greg Fraser and I were looking in the cameras, he looks 13 years old. and Paul Atreides is that, is like an intellectual that has a strong abilities, physical abilities, but still someone that you will believe that will go from boyhood to manhood. You know, that's the beginning of that journey. Also, he is very charismatic. Camera loves him. I needed that charisma. Because what will happen next is we will need to believe that he will fool all planet and it will lead them into war. And I needed that kind of Timothy. Yeah, he looks skinny because he's a giant. I mean, seriously, it's very impressive how he transformed himself. The first scene I've done with him was, one of the first scenes was the gun Jabbar. And I will remember all my life the camera being on him. And I asked him, it's in a way, it's like an inverted exorcise. You know, there's something awakening inside him, and he will, this thing, that force will rise, and I saw it. I mean, seriously, I was shooting, and I saw him being possessed by a force. He is a very impressive actor.
Yes.
And it's only the beginning. Honestly, it's like,
well, the whole cast is extraordinarily impressive. Did it really turn out to be like the ideal? I think I read with Timothy that there was no plan B.
no, it was
Like the movie is scrapped if he's not doing it. But what about the rest of the cast? It's so brilliant, and Oscar Isaac. I mean, what a dad! You know, just the heart that he brings to that.
I think that
obviously it's the script, it's everything about it, but he really makes you understand, you know, what a decent person is and how much he cares for his child, not just a caricature.
I would say that no matter what people think of the movie, I think that if you know the novel and you see the actors and actresses, I think we did a good job about that. I'm very proud of the casting because the description, when you read the book and you see them on screen, it's pretty close. And the list of actors, when you look at the credits at the end of the names, it's pretty close to my ideal list. It was like there's very few people that for sometimes schedule but I would say that it's a book that raised a lot of enthusiasm amongst the acting community. So when I was making a phone call, I didn't like to convince people to get on board. They were all very excited because they all loved the book. It was very nice experience to do the casting of this movie.
And what an ensemble of award-winning actors, but that's also true for most everybody behind the scenes as well. You have a tremendous team behind you in cinematography. Could you talk a little bit about that part of your team?
Yeah, the first person that got on board was Hans Zimmer, the composer. Why? Because at the time I was finishing when I decided that Dune would be my next project. I was finishing the music on Blade Runner, and I had to. I had such a great experience with Hans, who is one of the. It's one of the most impressive artistic experience that I had to do Blade Runner with him and Ben Walsh-Fish, and I was just like I spontaneously. I knew I needed a composer for Dune, and I said to Hans, "Do you know Dune?" And he said to me, "Do I know Dune?" And he said, "It's my favorite book, and I read it like decades ago. And you know what? I never saw any incarnation, any movies, because he wanted to stay a virgin. I didn't want. He said I would kill to make a score for Dune.
Oh.
I knew I had a composer. So I Hans. Then I went for the production designer. I went to my old friend Patrice Vermette, who was not known for having that kind of experience. It was his first movie of that scale, but I knew, because I made I worked with Patrice for years. I made several movies with him, but that he will have the culture and the sensibility to bring the images that I had in my youth. Patrice and I having the same background, and that I knew, and he loved the book too, so I knew that we will be together able to dig in the past and bring back, like archaeologists, the images that we had as kids when we read the book. I knew that it would be, Patrice and I, we have a very direct connection, you know, it's like very direct, as I would not have him to adapt to myself, we think alike, so it's like, that was a done deal. And then for a cinematographer, I needed a cinematographer that will embrace nature, that will not fight against nature, that will not try to embellish nature, that will just try to embrace it and bring the power out of it. And Greg Fraser, for me, was my first choice. I was really impressed by what he did on Mary Magdalena, on what he did on Zero Dark 30. I remember the cinematography of Zero Dark 30 is amazing. I mean, it's like, the same, I also look all these movies. I mean, I was I wanted someone that had the flexibility, someone that would have the spontaneity with the camera work, and Greg went on board. So that those were my, let's say, my first people that I approached and that they came on board with me.
I believe I read that the people behind the camera, well, not just the camera, the whole crew, many of them were so engaged in it, like Hans Zimmer went into the desert so he could immerse himself in the desert and dream about the desert and caress the desert. I'm not quite sure, but that's quite a commitment from people who they're so engaged in this particular.
It's a project that brought people. It's really it's a project that created a lot of passion into the artists who work because people love the book. People understood the responsibility we had to honor Frank Herbert's poetry, and everybody were very dedicated, and yeah, it was really moving for me to see the passion behind the camera.
I think they loved the book and they loved your work too.
They're not here. we don't know. I can't say they love the book.
But talking about the desert and locations and special effects, you went out of your way to use as much of that as you can. You filmed many different parts of the world, in Jordan and Hungary and Abu Dhabi and other places as well. And whenever you didn't have to use special effects, I understand you didn't. Now I know maybe the sandworm, you know, they were, I think,
very well trained,
a couple of hundred years ago. But other than that,
it's just an old-fashioned. I come from the documentary, and I was raised making cinema, putting the camera in relationship with reality and trying to find the best angle, to find something poetic, something meaningful out of reality to create cinema this way. So when it comes to fiction, even science fiction, that's the way I work. I mean, I need real environments. My life would be so much easy if I was able. I was inspired by virtual environments, but I admire the directors that can do that. I like old-fashioned way of doing things. I didn't invent nothing. Movies have been made this way since the beginning. I mean, it's just that technology allows us sometimes to create virtual environments, but I'm not inspired by that. I love life, and life means like I love how we all were deeply inspired by Jordan and Abu Dhabi, bringing the crew in the desert, the cinematographer, the actors, and myself, the way I directed them. It had an impact, and I would have never been able to put this movie in the back. Like, it was like, of course, we shot in Budapest. We built as much sets as possible. It's part of the process for me, and I'm grateful that the studio, in fact, it was not a negotiation. I mean, I said to them, they didn't choose Jaws in a swimming pool. I want to go in the movie's called Dune. I will not shoot that. I need the real thing. And honestly, we had great fun. It just means that of course, it was difficult physically, but it was so inspiring, and I just surround myself with people that were dedicated and had fun playing in this environment. It was super. I mean, the desert has an impact. That is the story of the movie. I mean, it's like you are following a boy that will have an introspective journey that will make peace with a part of himself as he's discovering a landscape and a new culture, and then the impact of the landscape on the psyche. And I wanted us to follow the same path, you know, and as Frank Herbert did, by the way, he was inspired by nature to write his novel, and I wanted us to follow the same path.
Well, just from the few interviews I saw of some of your cast, they looked like they were really bonded and actually, you know, had a really great time. It's almost like there's two experiences for you and the actors and making of it and the actual film itself.
Actually, when you put Oscar Isaac and Josh Brolin and Timothée together, it's like kindergarten. I was more like I felt like a school teacher more than a director or something, trying to create they had a lot. They went along. Yeah, I think that when you put people together and the conditions are a bit difficult, and there's a good spirit, it's bonding. Nice bonding.
Yeah, there's so many great performances and actors to talk about, but just to go to more of the dark side, Stellan Skarsgård, just as his character is so evil, just, it's a delight to watch.
Stellan was the first name that came to my mind when I talked about the Baron, because I didn't want the Baron to be a caricature. I didn't want him to be. I wanted him to be a real being, frightening being, with a thoughtful character I called Stellan and I explained to him what I wanted to do. He had one question. He said, "How do you want to do it?" There was a silence, and I said the truth. I said, "I would love to use prosthetics. I would love to put you in a suit and to recreate for real And he said, "Okay, I'm in." Because he didn't want me to. He said, "If you had said to me you wanted to do it CGI, I would have said, I'm sorry, I'm not your guy." But the fact that, so the good news is that when he was waking up in the morning and doing 8 hours of makeup, he didn't complain once. It was part of the decision.
That's incredible. I want to talk a little bit, maybe a little bit more serious stuff, because the film deals with so many important issues, whether it's ecology, environment, war, man's inhumanity to man, and so many positive things too, obviously. But it's also an analogy to what's going on now. How much of that was, I know the book is the Bible, but how much of that between what's going on with authoritarianism around the world and the wars and the pandemic, how much of that was a consideration for you?
But the thing is that I would say that it's the book, as you said, was the Bible. The book, for those who know the book, when it was written at the beginning of the 60s, it was when he wrote, Frank Herbert wrote it as a kind of portrait of the 20th century. It was just like it became, as time went by, sadly more and more relevant. The book is more about today than it used to be. It's sad because it's quite tragic and dark book, but it's a tragedy and it's like so I just stay close to the book. I mean, I felt that it was totally relevant for what is happening today about when the danger of blending religion and politics together, the over-exploitation of the natural resources, the impact on colonialism, the alienation coming from colonialism, all that, those things that were embedded in the DNA of the book. So I didn't invent nothing; it was there, frankly.
I think people will be certainly talking about that. They can't get away from it. Those analogies. I'm really looking forward to seeing what's going to happen in the next film. You introduced, is it Chani as well, and that love affair, and see what happens with Paul's growth. And, but I do want to thank you for retaining the humanity of the book and the humanity that you've done in all your other films, whether they were large or small. We had the pleasure of showing Arrival for opening night. The empathy that Oscar Isaac feels for his son, and the need to really look at people as your friends and part of everything that is important in life, whether they're your child or they live halfway across the world, is really important, more now than ever. And I thank you for your brilliant work.
You're very generous. Thank you very much.
No, I mean it sincerely. It's more important than ever, and it's such a beautiful, beautiful film. I saw it for the second time this morning. I was doing the tech check. And, for a second I had a chill, and I go, God, it must be cold in here. Let me put on my hoodie. It wasn't the cold. It was the film. It was just giving me chills. It was just so fantastic. So I really appreciate you coming here with this film and coming in person, and I hope you will return many times.
Thank you. Thank you for thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you for your generosity. It's an honor for me to be with. It's an honor for me to be with you. It's a privilege. Thank you for your generosity, everybody.